Hello, hello. Hopefully everything's working. All right, hello, hello. Welcome to first ever cooking stream here, and hopefully everything's going to turn out well. For those of you who haven't read the description yet, I don't really have any formal training or formal education or anything on cooking, so most of it's just things I picked up as I've cooked at home on my own. But hopefully, we'll still be able to enjoy cooking together here. And as you can see, our first dish we're going to make is some kimchi fried rice. It's, very tasty, very filling, quite like it. And luckily, it's not too difficult to make. So hopefully, after we get a few more things set up here, we'll be able to get started and get that cooking. All right, I think we have things going now. So let's go ahead and get on cooking, shall we? So, obviously, as we're going to be doing fried rice, the first and most important thing is that we need to have rice. Ideally, if you want to make some fried rice at home, you want to have rice that is already prepared and that you've chilled and tried to dry as much as you can. So this is rice that I made yesterday, and after I finished making it, I dished a portion of it out. This is about 200 grams worth. I dished that out, put it into a container, and chilled it overnight in the fridge. And then once I started getting things ready here, I put it out onto the plate, kind of spread it out a little bit just to get it as dry as I can. So that's going to be key ingredient number one there. And the next big thing for kimchi fried rice is obviously going to be the kimchi. So let's go ahead and get that. In case you're wondering why the kimchi is in multiple plastic bags, it's because it has a pretty pretty common issue where the container, because the pressure built inside from the gases that get produced as it continues to ferment, can cause a little bit of leaks around the lid. So the plastic bags are just to help keep the fridge clean. And kimchi as well has a really terrible tendency to stain quite a bit. So whenever you're working with kimchi, you want to use items that are going to be highly resistant to staining, such as stainless steel, glass. Preferably, you don't want to put it onto directly onto wood. Preferably, you don't really want to use plastics on it, although that would depend specifically on what kind of plastic you're using. But for today, I'm going to stick with my glass bowl here, and then some stainless steel utensils. So, first thing we're going to do is we're going to portion out the amount of kimchi we need. So I'm going to take out about 100 grams worth. And again, really easy to stain with that liquid, so I'm going to try to drain it out a little bit before I put it into the bowl. It's a little much there, so put that back. Just about there. All right, that's about close enough. If you're wondering what kind of places you can get kimchi at, some supermarkets sell this. Not all, but some do. Obviously, if you have a Asian market or a market that sells foods that are more common overseas, that's going to be a great place to pick some up. Personally, that's where I like to get mine. We have a local market for the Korean community that sells kimchi amongst many other ingredients. So I make trips there pretty frequently. And now that we have our kimchi here, we're going to go ahead and start cutting it up into smaller pieces using our scissors here. No specific size for these, you just want to cut it into more bite-sized pieces. And that's going to depend, because there's multiple kinds of kimchi as well. The most common kind that you're going to find is going to be kimchi that's made from Napa cabbage. Specific one that I have here is baby Napa, actually. But they also do kimchi with green onions. There's kimchi with cucumbers, different parts of the cabbage, and different cuts of the cabbage as well. So it's just all about what you want to do with it. As for the kimchi itself, for those who haven't had it before, kimchi is a fermented and typically spiced cabbage or other vegetable side dish that's really common in Korean cuisine. It has a bit of spiciness, a bit of a sourness to it, and a bit of a fermented funk as well. So it's incredibly popular with a huge amount of Korean cuisine. Not always as a ingredient per se. A lot of the times it's going to be served as I mentioned, a side. But there are a few recipes that use it as a main ingredient, such as today, where it's going to be a key part of it. Now, the other thing you want is if you're going to be using kimchi and kimchi fried rice, for instance, preferably you want the kimchi to be more on the sour side than the not sour side. Naturally, as the kimchi ages, it'll get more sour. So this kimchi that I have, it is starting to be more sour, which is kind of where I like it to be. If yours isn't quite sour enough, what you can do is just add in, like maybe 1 teaspoon at a time, a load of vinegar into it. You don't want to go overly sour, just a little bit more sour than perhaps like savory or sweet, depending on what kind of veggies are in there. So along with that, we're going to add in a few more things to season it. So first thing I'm going to add is I'm going to add a little bit more gochugaru, or Korean chili flakes. Now, kimchi itself, depending on which ones you get, can be spicy, depending on who you are. It already has some gochugaru in there, which is part of the process. I like a little bit extra, so I'm going to put in about 1/2 tablespoon here. And again, if you're not really into spicy, or if you think the kimchi is spicy enough, you don't need to add it. Along with that, I'm going to add in some oyster sauce here. I'll be honest, I don't actually know what oyster sauce is made of. If it's made from oysters, if you use it to cook oysters, if you use it when you eat oysters, not really sure. But it's another pretty common ingredient in a lot of Korean cooking. And in case you're wondering, when it's added into a food and it's kind of cooked through, it doesn't really produce a lot of it doesn't really make a fishy flavor. It's mostly there to add a little bit of sweetness and some more umami into the dish. Similarly to fish sauce with a lot of southeastern cuisine. Next, we're going to add about 1/2 tablespoon of soy sauce, or a little bit more if you want more. With the soy sauce, all different kinds. A lot of the soy sauce are going to be dependent on the region. So just any Korean or Japanese or even Chinese soy sauce will be fine. You probably don't want to go too much southeastern type soy sauce just because they add a sweetness a lot of the time. Unless you have tried it beforehand and it's just what you like. So just go with whatever you prefer. Along with this, I'm going to add in 2 tablespoons of water. The water is going to be here mostly to help us prevent the ingredients from scorching as they cook in our pan. Because the gochugaru and, as we're going to be adding next, the sugar, are very keen to burn rather quickly. So we want to avoid that as much as we can. Speaking of sugar, we're going to add 1 teaspoon of sugar. And one more thing that I'm going to add, and again, it's up to you if you want to add it, is I'm going to add a bit of MSG here. Have some Japanese MSG. We're going to add about 1 teaspoon. It's going to be kind of hard to measure and pour this. Or sorry, not 1 teaspoon. About 1/2 teaspoon. That should be good. Just going to mix that together as much as we can. And for kimchi fried rice here, this is all the seasoning and ingredients that we're going to be using in the kimchi as well as the rice. So when we actually get to frying the rice, we're not going to add any other sauces or seasonings. It's all going to be basically as part of this bowl here. But we do have a few other ingredients that we're going to be frying as well. So we got that incorporated pretty well. Set that out to the side. All right, so as I grab some of my other ingredients, I'm going to go ahead and start preheating my pans. Show you here. So I got 2 pans here today. Just a small little non-stick frying pan, and then a, let's say medium, maybe a bit on the smaller side, non-stick wok. And this one's a flat bottom, so it's a little bit better for cooking indoors. And I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to start preheating these. I'm just going to preheat them on a medium-low heat for both. When we get to actual cooking, we'll adjust the temperature as needed, especially for the wok. But I want to do this just because I know that my stove is a bit on the slower side. It takes a while to really get up to temp. So that's why I'm going to do that. And after I prep some of the ingredients, I'm going to also add in the oil that we're going to be using to fry. I'm going to be using vegetable oil here. Whenever you're doing when you're frying Eastern Asian type foods, you want to use neutral tasting oils. Vegetable oil is the usual go-to for a lot of cooking. But if it's not really your thing, you can use other types of oils. Preferably, you don't want to use oils such as olive oil, for instance, because it's not greatly suited for high heat cooking, which especially wok cooking is going to do a lot of. But it also adds additional flavors that may not really pair well with some of the other flavors we have going on. So we're going to stick with vegetable oil today. So some of the other ingredients we're going to be going with is some onion. I just have a little bit of white onion here. It's about an eighth of an onion, so I'm just going to clean this up a little bit. And I kind of want just somewhat small pieces. You know, again, this is going to be all going into the fried rice. So, don't want any too big chunks of onion here. That won't be super pleasant. Oh, I will mention all the portioning that I'm doing is for one portion of rice. Obviously, that portion size may depend on the person, but this is going to be the portion size that I would be making typically for myself. Obviously, if you're making for multiple people, you'll need to scale this up. So I'm just going to kind of chomp through here. All right, there we go. As you probably could tell with my knife skills, as I mentioned, not really much of a professional when it comes to this. So obviously, if you're better at your knife skills, congratulations. Hopefully, I'll be able to improve that as we continue through. I'm just going to move this to a little prep pan here while we deal with the other things. All right, next up, I know we have onion, but gotta have some green onion as well. Green onion is a widely popular ingredient for a ton of Eastern Asian cuisine, and it's one of my personal favorites. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to peel back. If you look at the onion here, you can see some of the outer layers. They may have dried out a little bit, or maybe they're a bit on the dirtier side. So I'm going to clean up the onion by peeling off some of these outermost layers, just to get rid of some of those. After that, I'm going to just give it a quick rinse. All right, there we go. And the last few things that I usually do with my green onions as I'm getting them cleaned up and ready is if you look at the ends here, some of the ends are not very pleasing to look at, so I usually trim those up a little bit. So just gonna kind of get rid of those bits there, as well as that. And we're gonna chop this up. Now, obviously this is a large green onion. I'm not gonna use the entirety of this green onion for just one dish here. I am gonna be saving the rest of it though, because I use it quite often in a lot of other dishes. So let me go ahead and grab myself another plate here to store that. All right, so as we chop, we're going to keep in mind that we have the kind of more delicate, greener parts of the onion and the tougher, whiter parts of the onion. So the green parts here we're going to use more as a garnish at the end of the dish, and the white stalk here we're going to actually add in to fry with everything else. So let's go ahead and start chopping that up. I definitely hope over time I can improve the knife skills a little bit faster, a little bit smaller. I guess the few key things I've learned so far is to not have the fingers out, try to curl them in, which I'm still working on. As you tell, I always grab like that and I have to remember. Knife as well, I've been working on better grip on the knife instead of just holding the handle normally or putting my finger out. So. Alright, so there's all the more delicate green parts, so I'm going to set those off to the side. Like I mentioned, we'll use a little bit of them to garnish at the end, as well as saving some for future dishes of my own. And now, as we work down the stalk, now, depending on where you are, it might be hard to find green onions that are as big as this. Because I wouldn't blame you if you've mistaken this for a leek, if you just saw this on the shelf, just because of the sheer size of it. But, again, I like to, whenever I know I'm going to be making dishes like these, I'll go to to my Asian market, and they sell large green onions like these, as well as some other unique vegetables as well. If you get just the normal, the more typical green onions that we'll find, the smaller varieties, those will work just as fine as well. You don't have to get this super big one. But it does make it a lot easier to chop when it's this big, I will say. Oops. Well, easier to chop for somebody that doesn't know how to. Right? And if we were making a soup today, what a lot of people also do is the end of the onion, and if it had roots still on it, that's pretty common to use in a lot of stews, but we're not doing that today. So I'm going to just kind of rough chop some of these up so they're a little bit smaller for the fry. I'd probably recommend, if you were going to chop something this large, maybe a larger knife would be more beneficial. Unfortunately, don't have a larger knife right now. It was supposed to, it was actually supposed to arrive today, and then it got delayed till I think next week or something. So, small knife it is. All right, so I'm gonna save a little bit of this for some future foods. And then the rest, gonna put together with the onions we chopped earlier. You know, something that would be nice for these last little bits would be like a bench scrape. But I don't have one of those. And I don't really want to just drag the blade of my knife across the cutting board. So that shall be good enough for what we are doing. So I'm going to set that out. I'm going to quickly just dry off our cutting board a little bit. Because what we're going to do now is we're going to process a few proteins. Meats to be specific. Obviously, if you don't eat meat, then you don't need to do this part. Or you can substitute whatever it is that you prefer in place of these. But a common thing to eat along with kimchi and a lot of dishes is going to be beef or pork products. So I'm going to do a little bit of both actually. And what I typically like to do for a bit of a cleanliness aspect is I like to process all of my raw meats and actually even cooked meats as well. I like to process them on a plastic board, ones that aren't too expensive, just because you know, they'll soak up any juices, any blood or whatever else, and after that board goes bad, I can just throw it away, buy a new one. Whereas the wood board, it's a little bit more pricey. It would soak up those juices a lot more readily, and I'd rather keep it clean longer. So that's why I'm doing this right now. But let's go ahead and grab ourselves. We're going to grab just a single slice of bacon here. Don't need a ton. There we go. And what I'm going to do with the bacon is we're going to cut it down into smaller bite-sized chunks, just like everything else so far. Grab our knife here. And I'm just going to have it cut it this way. And then just cut it into smaller pieces here. And along with that, I'm also going to add in a little bit of a ground hamburger. I happen to have some left over from a different meal. So I'm just going to add in about 1/4 of a pound of ground hamburger on top of that. All right, good. So, I'm gonna go ahead and wash my hands real fast. Obviously, want to keep the contamination down as much as we can. All right, and with that, oh, sorry, forgot to mention, the one other ingredient that we're going to be adding, it comes a little bit later in the process, is going to be a fried egg. Just a single egg, which is what's going into that smaller fry pan. But other than those, that's going to be all the ingredients that we're going to be using for the fried rice. So let's go ahead and switch on over. Add in vegetable oil. And the first thing that I'm going to be frying up is going to be the bacon and the hamburger here. Because I do want to make sure that I get those cooked, as well as the fat that will render out from those products is also going to be used to cook the vegetables, the kimchi, and the rice at the end as well. So get those in there, break up the hamburger. There we go. Getting the hamburger kind of just broken down into, yet again, smaller bite-sized pieces. And I'm going to keep the pan at the moment on this kind of medium-low heat while I'm working it like this. There we go. Now I'm going to crank that up just to a medium heat. Now, ideally for wok cooking, you want a higher power heat, especially if you happen to have a gas stove. That's great for wok cooking, but not everyone has a gas stove. Unfortunately, I don't have a gas stove, so I just have to deal with this electric stove. And as you can see here, even though it's a kind of a medium-sized wok, I don't want to overcrowd it too quickly. Reason being is that for wok cooking, you want to make sure that everything has room for the steam to leave, so that you're not just boiling or steaming the food. You actually want to fry it. And unlike a lot of Western style cooking, you don't want it to just kind of sit and fry for too long. Another key point for wok cooking is to keep things moving. I can't really ideally do it here because of the lower powered heat, but if I had a higher power heat and a round bottom wok, I'd be able to just kind of keep stirring it while I do this kind of motion. I can't really do that, unfortunately, with my wok here. Alright, so look here, the hamburger's getting pretty well cooked. It's still, it's probably still a little bit on the, maybe medium side, a little bit pink still. Bacon is just now starting to get translucent. So now I'm going to add in all the onions. And with wok cooking, as you can probably see, as I get more and more stuff in here, it is going to be a little bit on the messier side. Ideally, you don't want to be too messy, obviously, but it is going to happen since you're just constantly moving things around here. If you're very confident, you can kind of do some small little tosses here. Right, there we go. It's come along well. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn up the heat just a little bit, not quite up to medium-high yet, just a little bit more heat, because now we have more product here in the pan, so trying to maintain that heat a little bit longer. Other reason why I don't want to go super high with the heat here in the wok, even though that is more typical for wok cooking. A few factors, actually. So I'm indoors right now, and my ventilation in the kitchen isn't super great. So it can't ventilate a ton of vapor and steam released as quickly as it would be with like a better ventilation system, or preferably outdoors. So I don't want to get it too hot too fast. But also because I'm using a nonstick wok, and a pretty cheap one at that. So, you know, just generally with nonsticks, especially cheaper nonstick pans, it's not great to cook it on really high heat repeatedly, because it can wear down the coating pretty quickly, as well as some other poor health side effects of it. So for kind of that higher power cooking, a carbon steel wok is going to be a lot better for that. And preferably outdoors, which I hope to do someday. Have an outdoor wok station, since I like doing a wok style cooking. If you don't have a wok at home, obviously you can still do this with a frying pan. It is probably going to be a little bit messier, even as messy as I'm being right now, just because the sides are more shallow. Alright, so a little bit more cooking here before we add in the kimchi. What I'm looking for right now is I want the bacon to be farther along in the cooking before I add in the kimchi. Reason being, because obviously the bacon is still going to cook while the kimchi is added, but it's going to be harder to tell by color how far along it is in the cooking process. So I guess while we're still waiting for the bacon to cook, thank you all for watching the video. Hopefully I'm going to be able to do this a little bit more often. We'll be doing more extravagant recipes as well. There'll probably be some more fried rice in there, probably some ramen here and there. But we'll be getting some more complicated things as well. And just to kind of briefly talk about food. So, probably for the first few recipes that we'll do together, I'm going to be sticking more to what the traditional or the more common recipes are going to be for different types of food. A lot of it's probably going to be Korean food, probably some Japanese food, and maybe a little bit of different regions of Chinese food. I don't cook Chinese food as often as I do Japanese and Korean food. But we'll also probably do some other foods as well. I really enjoy Italian food quite a bit. So we'll probably just do a bit of everything after a while. And we'll also start to kind of deviate from recipes here and there, just because we're not always going to be able to go with traditional methods. You know, maybe we can't get certain food products, or maybe there's like a specific kind of spice that you can't get. But it's also to kind of show how it is that I kind of think about with recipes. So what I usually pay attention to in recipes is seeing what kind of roles different ingredients play in a dish, and then see how I could utilize those ingredients in different ways in different dishes. And I use that to kind of produce and come up with new foods. Because, you know, anyone can follow a recipe. You know, that's not too tough to do. Obviously, if you're not good at following instructions, you can't follow the recipe. But everyone is capable of following a recipe. But if you want to be able to make your own recipes, you need to think about what it is that certain foods do, what they're adding to something, techniques and all that. So that's what we'll be going over eventually. All right, so the bacon's a little bit farther along now. It's starting to get some color. So I'm going to add our kimchi mixture here. Mix that in, get everything coated in that mixture. And as you remember before, we added that water into the kimchi, so before we add the rice in, we definitely want to cook that water out. The water is just there to give us a little bit of a breathing room so we don't burn our sugar and chili flakes. And again, right now I have it on setting number 6 on my stove, so in between medium and medium-high heat for my stove. Once we add in the rice, I'm going to turn it up to a medium-high heat. And actually, once we add in the rice, unlike some other fried rice, especially since we're cooking indoors and not on as high of a heat as like a restaurant would, it's not going to be frying for a very long time. And the fried rice texture isn't going to be quite what like a restaurant quality fried rice is going to be. And a lot of that's going to be because of the kimchi. There's just so much liquid in here that you're not going to be able to get those like super, super crispy rice unless we cooked it separately. But I want the rice to kind of absorb a lot of this kimchi flavor. So it's more about the kimchi than that fried rice texture. All right, just a little bit longer on the kimchi here. We're about cooked out of the liquid. If you've watched this far into the video, I guess go ahead and put down a comment. What kind of, do you cook at home very often? What kind of foods do you usually cook at home? Maybe what are some ideas for dishes that you would like to see cooked? Whether it's Korean, Japanese, or, whatever it might be. like to see. All right, so now I'm going to add in our rice. Trying to get some of this rice a little stuck to the plate here. So I'm going to mix this in, and then I'm going to turn up the heat a little bit. Also want to try to break up these chunks of rice as much as I can. All right. Turn up the heat a little bit. While that's heating up, go ahead and get our egg going here. Just going to fry that sunny side up. Yeah, the other key thing for wok cooking is you got to move fast. You sit too long, things are going to start sticking and scorching. So, don't want that. All right. Gonna go ahead and turn off the heat there. While that coasts down, gonna go ahead and put that onto my plate. There we are. Gonna try to make my plate look a little bit more presentable. May not quite come out like the thumbnail did there. And trying to get all that done while that egg finishes cooking. There we go, slightly cleaner presentation there. Add on a few green onions. A few around the plate as well. I just really like green onions. Alright, egg's just about finished there, so as soon as that egg is done, we are all finished, everyone. And again, I want to thank you all for watching the video here with the cooking. As I said before, you know, as we continue doing the our cooking together, hopefully I can improve a little bit. Hopefully I give you some ideas on things you can cook at home. We can try to find some new foods to cook together. Maybe I can cook things I've never made before. Always interested to find new things. And it looks like with that, looks like the egg here is done well enough for what I like on sunny side. So, put that guy. Oop. Get the spatula here just in case. There we go. All right. And with that, everything is finished on our kimchi fried rice. And I haven't yet decided if I'm gonna eat these on camera. I don't really think anyone's gonna like hearing the sounds of that. Well, I guess there are people that do like hearing the sounds of that. But let me know what your all thoughts are. I could tell you from when I've eaten these, obviously you get a little bit of a smokiness from the rice, not quite as much as you would with a fully fried rice, like an egg fried rice. But the kimchi is really the star of the show here, and when you cook up the kimchi without burning it, it produces a very deep kind of savory, sour, and a little bit of that kind of funky fermented flavor that I really, really enjoy. However, I do have an idea for a tasting notes. Because as I was at the store getting some things today, I finally found a place that sells Jinro soju. For those that don't know, soju is a extremely popular alcoholic drink in Korea. Jinro is one of the bigger names for soju. And this is just the original flavor soju. So, pour a bit, just a small amount. See what it tastes like. Yeah, obviously with the original one, there's not going to be a whole lot of like flavors from it. It's a spirit that's distilled down from rice. If I could describe just the original one, obviously clean is going to be the first thing I can think of when it comes to describing that. But clean, but not overly ethanol-y in flavor. Unlike if you drink, let's say vodka on its own. Now, obviously, this isn't as high of a alcohol content as with like vodka. This particular one's only about half of that, so 20%, 40 proof. If I could compare it to sake, which is hard because there's so many different types of sake. I guess flavor-wise, this is probably what you would imagine the most like base version of a sake could taste like, but not as floral, if that makes sense. But I quite like it, and I think something that's nice and clean like this will go well with some kimchi fried rice. So, thank you all again for watching. Hopefully we'll be able to do this soon again, and until then, I'll see you all next time.